Tonight, we have a very, very special guest, Dr. Ronnie Wexler, who's president of the HeritageStudyProgram.com. You can go look it up and pull it up on your internet and see all the things that they're doing. But he travels around all over the United States, bringing understanding to current events that's going on in Israel right now and raising awareness in the Christian community about Israel, and of course, encouraging believers to lift Israel up in prayer. And Dr. Wexler will be on Mother's program in the morning from 9 to 11 Central Standard Time. So those of you watching by television, listening by radio, internet, be sure and tune in. It is my privilege and my honor tonight to welcome to this podium Dr. Ronnie Wexler.
Thank you. How long do I have? What time do you finish? Shalom. I can't even begin to tell you how happy I am to be here. This is my first time in Baton Rouge, and I'm glad to be in this church. From the moment I stepped foot in this city, there was some vibration at the airport already when Brother Josh came to pick me up, and I felt that I'm in safe ground. And the reason I'm saying that is not everywhere I go, I feel that way. In the last several months, or years even, I've been invited to speak in colleges and universities and become parts of different panel discussions, trying to make sense to people that don't care to know the truth. So first of all, I thank God for allowing me to be here. And I want to say in Hebrew, Hinei matov u'ma na'im shevet achim gam yachad. How good it is and how pleasant for brethren to dwell in unity together. I feel that I belong here, and I feel that you belong in Israel, and I feel that there's nothing that should separate us. Before I go any further, I'd like to say something about myself. Born, educated, raised up, served in the Israeli army. I'm a very emotional man. I see the Israeli flag being raised, my eyes are filled with tears. I can't sing Hatikva, which is the Israeli anthem, because I choke. There is something about me that I can't explain. But when I'm told to pick up a weapon and to protect my country, I'm there. I took a pledge to protect Israel and to die if necessary, and so did my daddy before me. And we did it with a purpose in our heart. Being Israeli is not being a Jew. Being Israeli is being a Zionist man. Jews in the United States of America are not Israelis. I want you to understand that. I have the same problem understanding Jewish people in America than you have the same problem understanding why they vote in a certain way. I don't understand that. And forever, if you try to explain it to me, I will probably understand the logic at some point, but it still doesn't make any sense. Maybe the duality, maybe the misunderstanding, maybe not trying, maybe trying to fit into the rest of the people. Well, so happened to the people in Europe that tried to be like the Germans. That didn't help them. So a Jew has to be first a Zionist. And my friends, I think you are Zionists. This year is a very important year. It's a year of Jubilee in Jerusalem. It's a 50-year Jubilee from the time of the Six-Day War in 1967, and today is 2017, and we are going to be celebrating in Jerusalem the unification of the city. And believe me, I feel it in my heart that if the Bible wasn't canonized yet, there would be another chapter or another book telling us the story of Jerusalem being unified and come back as the capital of Israel, the way it was declared some 3,000 years ago by King David. So this year, and I'm just going to mention it and let go because I have a lot to cover in about 40 minutes, so I'm just going to get it over with. We're going to have a tour in June 19 to the 29, 2017, where we're going to sign in Jerusalem, on the Temple Mount, the proclamation that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. Who wants to go? Who wants to go? Make sure on the way out you pick up a leaflet, and the travel agent was good enough to, on the occasion that I am here today, to give $500 off that is valid until the end of the week. So you still have time, and there's some reservation forms here that you can actually fill and give Brother Josh, who is around here, and come to Israel. I promise you to be at the airport to shake your hands when you arrive in Israel, and I will be the one that will moderate all the classes on location and bring you up to the Temple Mount to sign the proclamation with members of the Knesset, members of the government of Israel. That's enough. We're not going to talk about the tour anymore. Okay. I feel a little bit that this is too easy here because I'm preaching to the choir. But it is important to me that by the time I leave, you have enough information to give the enemy answers that now you're lacking, or you have but you don't know how to formulate. And they tell you all kinds of things. And if you are watching CNN, BBC, ABC, NBC, and all this acronym, stop watching it, watch Sun. Watch the network that tells you the truth. Watch tomorrow between 9 to 11. All these people all over the world, watch tomorrow from 9 to 11. I'll give you a little story. 2 years ago, when the war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza was taking shape, the world was telling that Israel is being bombarded, and every minute there's a missile being shot from Gaza. Truth of the matter is, some 6,000 missiles were shot at Israel. Glory to God, none hit target. At that time, when the war was on, I had a symposium in Jerusalem about the Middle East. And people told me that although they want to come, their families are telling them not to go because they will be risking their lives in Israel. And I was busy in Jerusalem talking to people and even using Skype when CNN and the rest were showing all kinds of missiles in the skies. I walked in the streets of Jerusalem and said, don't worry, just come. Have faith. And many came, a few hundred came. And after a while, in Jerusalem, 2, 3, 4 days into the symposium, I asked them, how do you feel? And they said, well, we feel great. There's no war. I said, you sure there's no war? They say, we know there is war because when we come to the room at 5 o'clock in the afternoon after the class, we turn on the television and we know there's war in Israel, but we don't feel it. Israel is the safest place on earth. Period. Let's now try to understand and make a timeline, history and the Bible, so we can understand what the problem is all about. Why is it that Israel, the size of New Jersey, is every day in the news and everybody is trying to conquer it from beginning of time until today, and there's not a minute of rest in Israel? What's going on? So let's make an assumption. You know, in mathematics, we can go forward without taking an assumption. It's called axiom. We know that between two dots, the straight line is the shortest, but we can prove it. We know that two parallel lines don't meet, but we can prove it. Yet, it's the base of mathematics. For us, the axiom is the Bible. That's the truth. If we believe in the Bible, No other assumptions are necessary. What does the Bible tell us concerning the land of Israel? That there is a deed given by God to the children of Abraham. God said to Abraham, I'm giving you this land. Took him out of a beautiful city, Ur, that was today like New York, and told him just walk in the desert and come to a country that was nothing there, and told him, this is the country I'm giving you. That was the beginning of the covenant. When Abraham came to Israel, the promise of God surpassed what Abraham expected, and God told him, according to Genesis 12, not only that I will bless you, but I will bless those who bless you, I will curse those who curse you, and through you I will bless all the nations. Yet the nations have nothing better to do but cursing Israel, fighting against Israel, and try to destroy it. More so, the neighbors of Israel claim that there's no reason for Israel to exist from the beginning of Israel. I don't know how many of you know, but the Quran takes the story of Abraham and attributes it to Abraham and Ishmael. There's no Isaac. So when we really want to understand the problem, we need to follow it through. The nation of Israel, as we know it today, started in 1948. Between the time of Abraham to the time of David Ben-Gurion, there's about 2,400 years. So I'll go very, very quickly and touch certain points in the history of the nation of Israel. We know that Moses took the Israelis out of the Israelis out of Egypt. Joshua brought them into Israel. There was a kingdom in Israel. King David was king of Israel, but not in Jerusalem. Something similar happened that reminds us a story of Abraham and King David that's important to remember. Abraham, when he needed to bury Sarah, bought a piece of land in Hebron, which is about 20 miles south of Jerusalem. He bought it. He got the deed. How do we know? The Bible tells us. He bought it, and he even bargained because it was given to him free, and he said, no, I have to pay. David, king of Israel, decided to buy Mount Moriah from the family of Araunah the Jebusite. King of Israel needed to buy land. What happened to eminent domain? Could have kicked the man out, give him another piece of land. No, he bought it. Why? The deed is necessary. My friends, some of you own homes. Would you sell your home or buy a home with no deed? Okay. So the Bible made sure that the deed is recorded. Remember, you have to record your deed. Correct? The story of Abraham and the story of David are similar. However, the children of Israel had a problem, and they still have the same problem. Solomon built a temple. The kingdom was split. Kingdom went to exile. I'm jumping over big periods here because you know the Bible. King Cyrus is allowing the Jews, not all of Jews, but at least the Judean, the tribe of Judah, to come back to Israel, even supplies them with a garrison of soldiers to help them, money to build the walls of Jerusalem, and Jerusalem is being built again. Wars between Jews actually brought to the destruction of the second temple. But before the destruction of the Second Temple, Jesus predicted it's going to happen. And Jesus said, when he wiped over the fate of Jerusalem, give Caesar what belongs to him. Pay the taxes. Don't worry about it. Very practical advice, but the Jews didn't take it. And Jerusalem was destroyed. When Jerusalem was destroyed, the Romans, to diminish any importance of Jerusalem in history and the nation of Israel, decided to change the name of Jerusalem to Ilia Capitolina and the nation of Israel to Palestina. Palestina is similar to the name that the Philistines had, those group of people that lived along the shores of Israel at the time. And they were Phoenicians. They came from the islands of Crete and Cyprus and Greece. They have nothing to do with the people who call themselves today Palestinians. Different race. So those who confuse the name, or those Arabs that try to make some connection between the names, are misleading. Palestina and Palestinians are two different groups. The Jews are going to exile. Many of them are still in exile, because those who don't live in Israel are in exile. So they're still there. And for many, many years, Jews didn't have it so good. Nowhere in the world Jews had it good. There were always pogroms against Jewish people. Why? The Jew always knew how to read and write, so they became always the people who managed. If we lived here, it would be plantations, but in Europe, it was the cities and the kingdoms. Every city was a kingdom. So they managed it for the king or the ruler. Meaning what? They were collecting. They were telling the people how much they had to pay. Who likes those people who collect taxes? Nobody. At the same time, the Jew knew how to read and write and possessed tremendous amount of knowledge. So there's some jealousy. How come you know and I don't? So at all times, there were problems for the Jew. The Jew was open season for bad things to happen. Many of you know about the Spanish Inquisition. And after the Spanish Inquisition, when Ferdinand and Isabella threw away all the Jews from Spain, many of them died. Some of them found refuge in different places. But there was not one country in Europe that at one point or another did not expel all the Jews. This you didn't know. And that's true. So the Jew always needed, according to the Bible, to be in the land promised to their fathers, to Abraham. But what happened to this land? Well, in the beginning it was the Romans. They didn't like the Jews to be there because they revolted, so they threw them out. Then came the Byzantines. They didn't like the Jews because it was contrary to what they believed in. After the Nicaea Convention, the Jew was a threat maybe to the I would call it today the Catholic Church. So they didn't find anything in common. So that was a problem. And then in the 6th century came Muhammad and created a new understanding. I wouldn't even call it religion. It's not.
Right.
So he tried to sell it to who? To the Jew. And the Jew told him, forget about it. That's false. Amen. So he went against them. And when he died, Omar, who took control after him, went in the conquest and took over the entire Middle East, even North Africa, all the way to Spain. And they didn't like the Jew very much because there was a story already with Muhammad and the Jews. So the Jews didn't have it so good in Israel. And then in the 11th century, a pope in Europe came with a declaration, go and avenge the holy places in Jerusalem. They call themselves the Crusaders. How did they finance their trips? Anybody know? They went to the Jewish communities in Europe, raped and killed everybody, took their money to finance a holy war. If there was ever an oxymoron, that was it. They come to Jerusalem, they fight against the Muslims, and they find a great number of Jews in Jerusalem. They didn't want them there. What happened is, they put them in the main synagogue in Jerusalem and they set fire to the synagogue. That's in the name of Jesus? I don't think so. That couldn't be Christianity, at least not you. Why not? Because you're Zionists. Because you moved out. You're no longer in this kind of situation. Let's move onward. Crusaders finally are defeated too because they became very greedy. When you come to Israel, I'll explain more. I promise you, we'll have in 10 days, we'll have a whole semester. But here I'm going to jump. So the Crusaders are out, and come another group of people. They call themselves the Mamelukes. Doesn't matter, but they did the same thing. They killed the Jews. After the Mamelukes, another empire grew up in the Middle East, known today as Turkey. But at that time, it was the Ottoman Empire. And they controlled the entire Middle East. Can I have picture one? The entire Middle East. Look at the Middle East. Can you tell where Israel is? I cannot. It's so small that you can't even write the name Israel. But this entire area was controlled by one nation, the Ottoman Empire. When you're in Israel, or tomorrow maybe in the program, I will talk a little bit about another empire that similarly controlled the whole world and probably was the closest to destroy all the Jews as we know them. But this is a map of the Middle East. This was all Ottoman Empire. If you can read, you will see Egypt there, Libya, you will see Sudan, you will see Saudi Arabia, you will see Syria, you will see Iraq, see Iran, you'll see Lebanon. It's all there. But those countries did not exist. I will say it again. These countries did not exist. It was one mass of land called the Ottoman Empire. Do you understand what I just said? There was no country known to us today existing then. The only place that we know from the Bible is Canaan, Israel, Judea, Samaria, that's it. The rest of them known as Damascus, remember the road to Damascus, and so on and so forth. So there were no countries. The Ottoman Empire controlled the area for about 500 years. They even went to Europe. They went all the way to Vienna. They controlled a tremendous chunk of the old world. At the time, probably the most important part of the world, because the crossroad of the world was always Israel. And this is why everybody fought to get control in Israel, because the Via Maris, the way of the sea from north to south, crossed Israel. The way to Manchuria crossed Israel. The way to the Hejaz crossed Israel. The Damascus Road, the King's Road, all these highways were in Israel. So any country that controlled Israel basically controlled all the trades and all the caravans that came and gone. So it was very, very important. And the Ottomans, in more modern time, had the same idea. So they controlled Israel until when? Until World War I. World War I, they sided with the Germans, and we know what happened to the Germans, right? They lost the war. Now, what happened to the Jews? At all time throughout history, there was presence of Jewish people in Israel. There was never a time that Israel did not have Jewish families in Israel. In other words, not everybody was in exile, not everybody was killed. There were thriving cities in Israel outside of Jerusalem and also in Jerusalem as late as 250 years ago. Evidently, there's a lot of writings about the families in Jerusalem, and people in Israel can go back and trace their families way, way back. So there were always Jewish presence in Israel. Now, most Jews obviously did not live in Israel. Where were they? Mostly in Europe. Mostly in Europe. Towards the end of the 18th century, God is incredible. How he orchestrates things is sometimes so fantastic that we don't understand. And it takes one person to change the fate of the world. Each and every one of us, at one point or another, can change the entire universe. In France, a man by Alfred Dreyfus served in the army of France, and because of jealousy, because they didn't want to see him as an officer, they accused him by treason. They said he sold ideas and secrets. And he was on trial. And a reporter by the name of Emile Zola wrote articles about it. And a man, listen to this, a man who lived hundreds of miles away from there by the name of Theodor Herzl, Benjamin Theodor Herzl, heard about it, a Jew, but assimilated, not Orthodox, doesn't really believe in anything, saw it and said, something is wrong. This man, Benjamin Herzl, is the visionary of the state of Israel. There is a mountain in Jerusalem called Mount Herzl. This is the main cemetery, unfortunately, of the Israeli army. It is the Arlington of Israel. And he's buried there too. He died in Europe, but when Israel was established, they brought his body to Israel. He called his movement the Zionist movement, and people started to move to Israel. What did they do in Israel? These Jews that came to Israel, remember, they knew how to read, they knew how to write, but they didn't know how to plow the ground. They didn't know how to become farmers. They just didn't. But they came, and they came with money, because money was available to Jews in Europe because some families, like the Rothschild, for instance, had money and they supplied them with what they needed. So they came to Israel and they provided what? Jobs. So people from the entire vicinity, today we call them Syrians, Iraqians, Jordanians, came to Israel because there were jobs to be found. And they started to work the land for the Jews, or with the Jews. Guess what they call themselves today? They never left Israel. They're still in Israel. They are now called Palestinians. However, they never integrated in the country. They were in Israel, they worked in Israel, but when more and more Jews started to come, the Arab nations around Israel started to feel threatened. Threatened by what? They don't need the land. Look at the size of it. So what's at stake here? What's at stake? The problem here, what's at stake here, is whose God is the right God? This is a spiritual warfare. It has nothing to do with land. Absolutely nothing to do with land. My friends, two-state solution doesn't exist. Number one, God promised the land to Israel. Number two, there's no place there for two states. Number three, if we want to have another state and they say you don't have the right to exist, how can we share the land with people who want to kill us? Number four, they think that our God is a false God. And if they get what they want, it's a declaration that God is Allah. That doesn't sit well with anybody here. Doesn't sit good with me. Doesn't make any sense to anybody. How do we know that that's the case? Because every time the Arabs were given an option to get something, they always refused. They always find reasons why not to take. They had more opportunities to get land, and they refused over the years. That after a while you ask yourself, so what do you really want? Well, what they want is the Jews to be out of there. That's what they want. The Jews to be out of there. Now, their place, if they want to be my neighbors, fine. But they have to behave. They have to behave. The truth of the matter is that if Hamas or Hezbollah lay down their weapons, tomorrow there'll be peace. But at the same time, if tomorrow we, Israelis, would lay down our weapons, there will be a massacre. I don't like this bargain. Doesn't sit well with me. So we fight. In 1948, Mr. David Ben-Gurion, the first Prime Minister of Israel, declared to the nations that he is going to make the proclamation for the sovereign state of Israel. The reason he said so, can I go to number 2? The reason he said it is because the British, the Great Britain, who had control over the land after World War I, remember there was a war, the Ottoman Empire ceased to exist, and the spoils, in other words, the lands, were divided between France and England. Israel, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Egypt became under the control or mandate of Great Britain. After a while, Great Britain had it up to here, and the Jews suffered 6 million people who died in concentration and death camps in Europe. The never-ending story of the Jew came to a peak, where the total destruction of the communities of Jewish people in Europe. And I think to a certain degree the world felt that they need to open up a little bit. And so did Britain, especially when several years earlier, lo and behold, the Minister of Foreign Affairs in England came with a declaration, the Balfour Declaration in 1917, that was almost word by word similar to the one that Cyrus gave Ezra and Nehemiah 2,000 years earlier. The Arab fought it all the way, and so did the world to a certain degree. But in 1947, 1 year before Israel became a state, the League of Nations, that was the organization before it became the United Nothing, that's what we call it in Israel, declared that Israel will be divided between Jews and Muslims, and it looked like this. Can you go to the next map? Look at that. The green is Arab, which is the fertile places in Israel, and the yellow is for the Jews, where all the down part of Israel is the desert, is the Negev. Nothing grew there then. The Jews were clapping hands and dancing in the street because any piece of land in Israel that is recognized by the world as Israel would be good enough. But the Arabs said no. The Arabs said, the moment you declare this is a sovereign state of Israel, we attack you. Now remember, Israel at that time had 650,000 people, Jews, living there. That's all, 650,000. The nations, go back to the first picture, the nations around Israel, if you count them together, were about 250 million. And the moment David Ben-Gurion announced the state of Israel, the war of independence started. Very well equipped Arab armies crossed the borders and from the air attacked Israel. Israel had nothing because the Brits, when they controlled Israel, made it impossible for Israelis to have armed forces. There were people fighting this war, tanks and airplanes, with pistols. After a while, more weapons started to arrive in Israel, especially from Europe. And I can tell you that when I became a soldier, my first rifle in Israel had a swastika on it, because it was smuggled somehow to Israel from Europe, and it was used by the Nazis before. Does God have a sense of humor? I swear, my gun, a Mauser 98, had a swastika engraved on it. We fought the war. I say we, I was a baby. We fought that war and we won. We won. 650,000 people in Israel. But before we won, now listen very carefully, because this is what I'm trying to bestow upon you. Before we won, it was clear to the entire world that the days of Israel are numbered, because what sense does it make for 650,000 people in Israel, which could probably amount to, 100,000 people who can fight, to go against all these Arab nations that are attacking Israel? It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense, but God doesn't need any sense. So when Israel was attacked, the advancing armies told the Arabs living in Israel, remember, there were about the same number of Arabs living in Israel, the Palestinians that came to work but forgot to walk out. They were told by the advancing army, you better get out. Move away from your homes, because we don't want you to get killed by friendly fire. Because we're going to destroy Israel, we're going to take the land, and we're going to kill the Jews. We don't want to kill you. You're our brothers and sisters. So get out of there, stay out in the neighboring countries for a little while, sojourn there for a little while, and then when we finish Israel, you come back and you inherit your homes again. That makes sense. So many did leave. Many did leave. You know what they call them today? Palestinian refugees. Israel didn't kick them out. Israel didn't tell them to leave. In fact, those who stayed, about half the number of Muslims that stayed in Israel, are still in Israel. And you know what? They carry the same ID as me. They have the same passports. They have the same rights like any other Jew in Israel. Beautiful. They didn't listen. But those who listened walked away and became refugees. Now let me ask you a question, my friends. How long does it take to a refugee to get integrated to the nation and become a citizen? When somebody is a refugee, I assume it takes a few months, a year, maybe 5, maybe 10. 70 years later, they're still refugees. And they never die. They multiply. About 500,000 left Israel. Today there are over 10 million refugees. What does it mean? That people who are born in different countries inherit the refugee status. Now, you may ask yourself, and remember, this is important for you to understand. You may ask yourself, why? Don't they want to be full-fledged citizens in the country that they live in? Of course they do. But maybe not. You see, in the United Nothing, there's a branch that takes care of refugees of all over the world, from all over the world. That's their part in the United Nations, to take care of refugees. However, there's another department that just takes care of Palestinians. And there's a lot of money there. So follow the money and ask yourself, why are they still refugees? And why don't they die? It's the best cure for death. You pay money and nobody dies. So the problem will never be solved. The issue is not land. Because every time they talk, they say, but we have the right, we need to have the right of refugees to return to Israel. What, we're going to take 10 million Arabs in Israel? So it doesn't jive, it doesn't work. The thing is that methodically, there are powers there, satanic powers, false God, that motivate the people to carry on with the fight, because once it changes, that means our God is the right God, and their God is no longer have any validation. The same thing as the Crusaders' time. So in 1967, Israel, can we go to the second picture? Israel became this kind of country where the yellow is the West Bank. This is where most Palestinians live. And I'm sure many people have been to the West Bank. Jerusalem is a part of it. We're being asked also to give Jerusalem. So this was Israel until 1967. 1967, my friends, I already was in the Israeli army. So what I'm telling you now for 2 seconds is first-hand information. I was with the people who actually did the job. We liberated Israel. We liberated the big part of Israel called Judea and Samaria. We also took the entire Sinai Desert. But that's what we did. Why did we do that? One day we woke up in the morning and we decided to do it? No, Israel was under attack. So that was what the Israeli army is called, IDF, Israel Defense Force. We defended our country. So sue me. And then there was Yom Kippur War, because they weren't able to achieve what they wanted. I was in that war too, in a different theater of the war. And that didn't help. So today, years later, the problem still exists. Now, the biggest question, and I'm going to end with this. What possessed UNESCO, the United Nations, to decide to vote whether Jews and Christians have any part or stake in Jerusalem? Where our Bible mentioned Jerusalem by name some 700 and odd times, their Quran never mentioned Jerusalem even once. And to add insults, the United States of America, just the last administration, allowed the United Nations to vote against Israel, threw Israel under the bus. Well, prayers are answered. I think your prayers helped. And there's a new administration. Amen. And I think things And I think things are going to change for the best. I could talk to you for another 2 hours, but I don't have that time. I have the time, but I don't have the time here in this podium. But I would like to, I have a feeling that I'll be here again. I'm sorry if I overstated my... I would like to teach. That's what I like to do. I like to teach. But it needs to be a little bit more, time does not allow me to do what needs to be done. Tomorrow we'll talk about it a little bit more, I hope, on the program. But again, this is a year of Jubilee. We're going to sign the proclamation. And I say, if Jerusalem wasn't given to anybody in 50 years, Bible says that every 50 years it goes back to the right owners. So I would like you to be there to sign the deed. I would like you to come and receive that which belongs to you. I would like to bless you with the blessing of Aaron, because I think the blessing of Aaron contains everything. And again, when I come again, I'll explain to you why, because every verse in the blessing of Aaron can fill a book, but it's got to be another time. So please stand up. And in the Hebrew, Yevarecha Adonai v'yishmerecha, the Lord bless you and guard you. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yichuneka, the Lord lift his face to you and provide you with sustenance. Yair Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. The Lord will shine his face towards you and will grant you peace. Amen, amen, and amen.
Thank you, Dr. I don't know about you, but I was blessed. I said, I don't know about you, but I was blessed. I can't wait until Mother's program in the morning. I hope you take one thing from this, and that is this: don't be afraid in the marketplace to speak up for Israel. Tell you a really quick story. The last time I preached in Dublin, Ireland, on Saturday, I was right downtown Dublin, and they have an area, they have street musicians, and they set up tables and stuff, and they had this huge table set up, and it was talking about how horrible Israel was, how mean Israel was, how that Israel is a nation of murderers, and the list goes on and on. And it was fronted by some Palestinian group, some university group there. And it was teenagers that were managing it. And I walked by. Now, you know me, right? I don't let anything get by. I'm walking by and I'm stopped and I'm looking at all of their propaganda. And they said, will you sign our petition? I said, no. I said, how many times have you been to Israel? None. How many times have you been at the West Bank? None. How many times have you been at the Gaza Strip? None. I said, then you don't know anything. And I said, I've been there many times, and the ones that are being persecuted is not the ones that you're supporting. But Israel is the one that's being persecuted. They didn't want me hanging around. But we stand up for Israel in the marketplace. Let everyone know I believe in Jerusalem. I support Israel, and I will stand for Israel. We want to receive an offering for Dr. Wexler to help him in his travels. Make out a check, make it out to Family Worship Center.
We hope you were blessed and enjoyed this live service from Family Worship.